Welcome to the Neurokrish Immersion. This episode looks at the whole experience of the unseen companion from Rabindranath Tagore's Jeevanadevata to the neuroscience of felt presence. In today's journey, apart from the poet's intimate companion, we will explore Shackleton's fourth man, the whole concept of survival psychology, Messner's silent climber, what happens in extreme altitudes, mystical traditions drawing on cross-cultural parallels from Sri Ramakrishna to Saint Teresa, the neuroscience of all these experiences, and how near-death experiences mirror these experiences that have been described by various individuals. We'll explore 6 domains where this mysterious presence appears. Day after day, O Lord of my life, shall I stand before thee, face to face, under thy great sky, in solitude and silence, said Rabindranath Tagore in Gitanjali. In his reminiscences, Jeevan Smriti, he says, in the lonely hours of my childhood, I felt a companion close to me, my playfellow, my comforter, my friend. He recalls this early presence whom he later named Jeevanadevata. In the Gitanjali, he says, I have found a great companion in thee who is ever present with me. He described it as the presiding deity of my life's destiny who revealed to me in the depths of solitude the unity of all existence. Scholars note that Tagore conceived Jeevanadevata as both intimate and universal, a personal deity yet not confined to a temple, a beloved companion yet not bound to one form. Jeevana means life, and Devata means a divine presence or deity. It's not a theological concept, however, but a lived relationship that Tagore describes. He talks about an inner beloved, universal truth personified, a companion in solitude, a source of creativity and conscience, neither fully within nor fully without. Indeed, in Gitanjali, he says, Life of my life, I shall ever try to keep my body pure. Thou art that truth which has kindled the light of reason in my mind. There is an intimacy, therefore, in Tagore's language, life of my life. The third man factor is a phenomenon of sensing an unseen companion during extreme stress or isolation. It's been described in the Arctic and Antarctic expeditions, in high altitude mountaineering, in solo ocean sailing, aircraft emergencies, desert crossings, cave explorations, and here we now shift from poetry to survival. What you'll discover is that the pattern is the same. Shackleton, in his 1916 South Georgia Island crossing, says, during that long and racking march, it seemed to me often that we were four, not three. This was a 36-hour march across unmapped terrain. There was minimal food and rest. All three men reported the presence, and the fourth man gave them strength to survive. All three men felt this independently. Indeed, it emerged in their writings or discussions after the march. When I look back at those days, I have no doubt that Providence guided us, not only across those snowfields, but across the storm-white sea that separated Elephant Island from our landing place on South Georgia. I know that during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were four, not three. I said nothing to my companions on the point, but afterwards Worsley said to me, Boss, I had a curious feeling on the march that there was another person with us. Crean confessed to the same idea. One feels the dearth of human words, the roughness of mortal speech in trying to describe things intangible. But a record of our journeys would be incomplete without a reference to a subject very near to our hearts. Messner, Reinhold Messner, is famous for making the first solo ascent of Everest without oxygen. And he talks about a presence. I could sense his presence. I needed no proof. I quote him, on one section, the front points of our crampons were only biting a few millimeters deep into the glassy hard ice. Suddenly, there was a third climber next to me. He was descending with us, keeping a regular distance a little to my right and a few steps away from me, just out of my field of vision. I could not see the figure and still maintain my concentration, but I was certain there was someone there. I could sense his presence. I needed no proof. And of course, in Messner's case, his brother Gunther had died on Nanga Parbat in 1970. He was going through extreme hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, and this silent figure descended along him in those circumstances. But note the certainty in what Messner says. I needed no proof. This phenomenon is often called the third man syndrome or the third climber in mountaineering literature, the sense of an invisible companion hiking beside a climber under extreme duress. Messner himself considered the presence not miraculous, but one version of his consciousness, a kind of alter self or survival mechanism. Other explorer accounts have similarly alluded to this third man. Frank Smith in Everest 1933 broke his biscuit to share with an unseen companion. Charles Lindbergh, during his Atlantic crossing of 1927, reported phantoms in the cockpit advising him. Joshua Slocum, the first solo circumnavigation of the world, a companion helped him navigate through the storm. Anne Bancroft, the Arctic explorer, sensed a protective presence during a whiteout. So this isn't rare. It's documented across a number of cases. There are mystic parallels. Teresa of Avila of the Catholic tradition, her companion was Christ in the interior castle. Rumi of the Sufi Islamic tradition talks about the beloved dancing within. Sri Ramakrishna of the Hindu tradition talks about Mother Kali guiding him. Krishna in the Gita, the Hindu scripture, says, I am seated in all hearts. And Wordsworth, William Wordsworth, in his romantic poetry, talks about a sublime presence interfused. Across cultures, across centuries, the same motive seems to appear. I quote Wordsworth, I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense of sublime, of something far more deeply interfused. Thus, even secular poets describe this. And notice, he says, disturbs me with joy. Rumi talks about it in the present sense, right now, always. The beloved is with me, dancing in my heart. Ramakrishna's Kali was a companion. It describes her as the inner indweller. I am the machine, and thou art the operator. I am the house, and thou art the indweller, he says. He talks of her as a personal mother. He spoke with her, he played with her, was scolded and comforted by her as if she were a living companion. He talks about her in the context of an all-pervading consciousness. My mother is the conscious principle. My Kali is infinite, all-pervading, and consciousness itself. In a sense, for him, Kali was not an abstract goddess, but his constant companion and guide, the one he consulted, argued with, surrendered to in every moment of his spiritual journey. There are common threads across all these accounts. Unseen, but vividly felt. This third person brings calm, strength, or guidance. This unseen companion appears in solitude or crisis. The unseen companion is non-threatening and often protective. Unseen companion feels more real than ordinary reality. Unseen companion is often transformative, changes the person. So what's happening in the brain in all these circumstances? There is what's called the psychology of felt presence, which you can describe as a vivid impression that someone is near without any sensory evidence of that being true. The triggers of this seem to be extreme isolation, which can be pathological, physical exhaustion, hypoxia, low oxygen, as on the Everest, deep meditation, grief and bereavement, near-death states, and situations where sensory deprivation is extreme. The key point is it exists on a continuum from the adaptive to the pathological. From a neuroscientific perspective, there appear to be three key systems. The first is the temporoparietal junction, which is present on both sides, the right and the left. It lies at the intersection of the temporal and the parietal lobes of the brain, roughly above and behind the ear. And while there's both right and left, the right side is especially implicated in self-other distinctions and felt presence phenomena. The role of the right temporoparietal junction is to distinguish the self from the other, to integrate body position and spatial awareness, and its disruption leads to the sense of a shadowy presence. The TPJ is central in differentiating me from not me. It integrates visual, vestibular or balance, and proprioceptive or body position signals to keep our sense of body location coherent. And when it's disrupted by hypoxia or epilepsy or electrical stimulation, people may report out-of-body experiencing, seeing oneself from the outside, and felt presence experiences, a sense of presence as we've been talking about. The right TPJ also helps us model other people's perspectives, intentions, and beliefs. In a way, it lets us simulate another mind. And that's why it's heavily studied in empathy, moral reasoning, and autism research. The TPJ is also part of the brain's predictive model of self and environment. Under stress or sensory deprivation, noisy signals may push the brain to resolve uncertainty by generating an illusory social agent, the sensed companion or the unseen companion. Remember, the brain is a prediction machine. It expects company. We also have what's called the default mode network, the brain's inner world system. Now, what is it? A large-scale network of brain regions active when we are not focused on the outside world. It includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex and precuneus, the angular gyrus, which overlaps with the temporoparietal junction, and the hippocampus, which is important for memory. What does it do? The DMN network is important for self-referential thought. Who am I? How do I feel? It's important for autobiographical memory, reliving the past, imagining the future. It has a role in theory of mind, imagining what others think or feel. It's important for daydreaming, imagination, mind wandering. It's a network that lights up when we go inward. Now the TPJ and what's its role alongside the default mode network. The right TPJ often functions as a peripheral hub of the default mode network. It integrates multisensory bodily input, as I said, the vestibular input, the visual input, and the proprioceptive input. It mediates the self and other boundaries. It supports perspective taking, a form of theory of mind. In other words, the temporoparietal junction is where the embodied sense of self meets the narrative sense of self. And that's one way of looking at it. Now, how do they work together? In terms of constructing the self, the default mode network weaves autobiographical memory with the inner narrative. The temporoparietal junction anchors that narrative to a bodily perspective. Together, they create a coherent sense of I am here and this is my story. In terms of simulating the other, the default mode network supports mental stimulation, imagining another person's perspective. The temporoparietal junction differentiates the self versus the other. It prevents the fusion of the self and the other. But when strained through hypoxia, trauma, or sensory deprivation, these boundaries can blur, producing a felt presence. In meditation, prayer, or poetry, the default mode network activity becomes modulated. The temporoparietal junctions, self or other processing forms loosen, allowing a merging with the companion, deity, or universal consciousness. And this is why Tagore's Jeevanadevata or Ramakrishna's Kali feel both intimate and infinite. In pathological states, an overactive default mode network leads to rumination and depression. A dysfunctional temporoparietal junction leads to hallucinations of presence, out of body experiences, alien limb phenomena, and miscoordination of both. One's inner voice may be misattributed as an external presence, and indeed, this emerges from schizophrenia research. Thus, in a, in a neurocognitive synthesis, the default mode network provides the narrative fabric through memories, imagination, and identity. The temporoparietal junction sets the boundary condition. What is the self and what is the other? And in balance, empathy, creativity, and spirituality all emerge. Out of balance, felt presences, hallucinations, mystical absorption, and these other experiences emerge. So in Tagore, the default mode network, poetic imagination, the temporoparietal junction, companion boundary, hence the Jeevanadevata. In Shackleton and Messner, the default mode network is under survival stress. There is a temporoparietal junction distortion. The third man emerges. In mystics like Ramakrishna, Teresa, and Rumi, the default mode network is reoriented through devotion. There's loosening of the temporoparietal junction. There's a sense of divine presence. And in near-death experiences, there is a global hypoperfusion disrupting both the default mode network and the temporoparietal junction, leading to out-of-body experiences and a guiding being. So the unseen companion, as we see, is a joint creation of the default mode network and the temporoparietal junction, the brain's inner storyteller and relational switchboard working together. Studies have shown that when you stimulate the temporoparietal junction on the right electrically, the person experiences a felt presence. When there is damage to the right temporoparietal junction, there's a distorted body or other boundaries develop. When hypoxia disrupts the right temporoparietal junction, the mountaineer experiences can be replicated. When the mechanism is that when sensory signals mismatch expectations, the brain creates the other to explain the discrepancy. This is not malfunction. Possibly, this is the brain stabilizing itself. So in the predictive processing model, the expected state is that I am with others because humans are social beings. The actual state is that I am alone. I'm isolated. I'm in danger. The prediction error detects a mismatch. The brain's resolution is to simulate a companion presence, and the result is a felt presence, which results in being a stabilized agency. The brain, therefore, recruits a social agent model to restore equilibrium. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, why would this evolve? As mentioned, humans are obligate social creatures, and isolation presents evolutionary danger to all of us. The presence provides a motivation to continue, an external perspective, better decision making. Remember Lindbergh's experience of someone guiding him through a difficult phase, emotional regulation, and of course, meaning making in a chaotic situation. This has survival value. Those who experience the guiding presence are more likely to survive, and the trait persists, and this may therefore be adaptation and not a bug. The being of light descriptions, therefore, are brilliant but not painful, a luminous presence that doesn't hurt the eye. The presence often radiates unconditional love, especially in the mystic circumstance. It's pure acceptance without judgment. The presence communicates wordlessly, seems to create an understanding beyond language. And this I have described in great detail in my podcast on the near death experience. The presence is all knowing yet non judgmental. There's complete awareness with compassion. The presence seems to guide a life review. It helps process life experiences. And the presence has a hyper real quality, often described as more real than real. And of course, Tagore's Jeevanadevata, Shackleton's fourth man, the mystic's beloved, and the guide and guardian archetype all have the same relation and structure, a presence that holds and guides. Bruce Grayson, in his scientific framework for the near-death experience scale, talks about a cognitive component, time distortion, thought acceleration, life review, an affective component, peace, joy, cosmic unity, a paranormal component, out of body experiences, ESP, encounter with the presence, and a transcendental component, light, boundary, spirits, and being. And this operationalizes the phenomenon for research. So, if you look at this in a comparative perspective, in poetry and art, you have a muse, you have Jeevanadevata, the function is inspiration, and the interpretation is both spiritual and creative. In survival, you have the third man and the fourth man. The function is guidance, the interpretation is psychological. In mysticism, you have the beloved, the inner Christ. The function is union, the interpretation is theological. In the near-death experience, you have the being of life, being of light, and the function is life review. Interpretation is transcendent. And in grief, there is the deceased or the loved one providing comfort and ensuring that there are continuing bonds. In different contexts, the unseen companion can appear. The architecture may well be the same. You can look at this, therefore, from three lenses. From a philosophy, spirituality lens, you can look at it as a cultivated relationship, a divine immanence, a poetic muse, an inner teacher. From a psychology lens, you can look at it as an adaptive coping mechanism, externalized resilience, social simulation, a meaning-making process. And from the neuroscientific lens, you can look at it as dynamics of the default mode network and the right temporoparietal junction, predictive processing, as we talked about, social cognitive systems, as we talked about, a neural survival mechanism. And indeed, it may not be that these are contradictory, they are complementary. So what then is a companion? A companion of this nature, the unseen companion, emerges from the neural architecture of the brain social systems, appears to have contextual triggers of isolation, stress, or contemplation, reflects the human need for relationships, the functional relation nature of human life. It reflects the capacity for meaning making, creating significance from experience. The presence is real as an experience. It has measurable psychological effects and consistent phenomenology. Real doesn't mean external, it means experientially valid. So, to the relational brain, humans being fundamentally relational beings, what does this companion reveal? Connection is so essential that the brain will construct it. Relationship is the ground of consciousness. Even in solitude, we are with. The social brain doesn't turn off, it pivots inward. This is profound. We cannot not be in relationship. There are practical implications. For grief, continuing bonds with deceased may be adaptive. For creativity, dialogue with a muse or inner guide enhances the flow. For solitude, presence can be cultivated through contemplation. For survival, recognizing the phenomenon reduces fear. For spirituality, neural basis doesn't negate meaning. Understanding the mechanism doesn't diminish the experience. Now, here are some cautions and boundaries. When does a felt presence become concerning? When it starts giving you commands to harm self or others, these are dangerous directive voices. This is not the unseen companion. When there are persistently intrusive entities which are unwanted, or disturbing, then again, this is not the unseen companion. When there is a loss of reality testing, when there is an inability to distinguish the inner from the outer, when there's an inability to function and your daily life is significantly impaired, when the unseen companion or presence seems to cause fear or distress rather than comfort, and it's giving you anxiety provoking encounters. Please remember, this is distinct from the pleasant unseen companion that and helpful unseen companion that we've been talking about. This requires professional support. Most felt presences are benign, but do stay aware to the continuum. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the self, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. The companion, therefore, is at the very structure of consciousness itself. Teresa of Avila says, the interior companion dwells within the soul. Interior, not external, yet not merely imagined. In Carl Jung's self-archetype, the organizing center of the psyche, there are a number of cross-cultural examples and recognition. So in Christianity, we talk of the guardian angel. In Greek philosophy, there is the daimon. In indigenous traditions, there is the spirit guide. In Hinduism and Buddhism, there is the inner guru. In New Age cultures, there is the higher self. There is a universal pattern, a helper or guide in threshold moments. This is archetypal. It appears across all human cultures. This can either be cultivation or spontaneity. The spontaneous appearance of unseen companion came in crisis, for example, Shackleton, near-death survivors, near-death experiences, or extreme conditions like Messner. Cultivated practice includes daily meditation like Tagore, contemplative prayer like Teresa, creative ritual, poets and artists, active imagination, what we call Jungian practice. You can wait for crisis or you can practice relationship now. So how do you invite such a presence to yourself? Solitude, creating a space for listening is important. Silence, reducing external noise may be important. Attention, noticing the subtle sense of accompaniment becomes important. Dialogue, Writing, speaking, or thinking towards the presence is important. Receptivity, not to force but to allow, is important. And consistency, daily practice, like Tagore, is important. This isn't just mystical gymnastics, it's relational attention. So there is a false dichotomy that we may be looking at constantly: neural mechanisms or spiritual reality. The integrated view might well be neural mechanisms as spiritual expression. Both science and spirituality are truisms, and the brain generates the experience, being the mechanism. The experience carries profound meaning, which is the significance. Explanation is not therefore elimination. Knowing how doesn't answer why or diminish what. Tagore says, "Life of my life, thy living touch is upon all my limbs," in Gitanjali. What the companion tells us is we are never truly alone. Relationship is fundamental to human existence. Connections can rise from within. The brain constructs meaning through encounter. Solitude and presence can coexist. Indeed, the gift we have as humans is that even when we are isolated, we are companioned. And this is the deepest implication of everything we have explored. The unseen companion, as we have discovered, Tagore's muse, Shackleton's guide, Messner's silent friend, the mystic's beloved, the NDE's light, the near-death experience, your brain keeping you whole. All of these, non-exclusively, mystery and mechanism, dance together. The next time you feel a presence in solitude, in prayer, in grief, in creative flow, in the wild, don't dismiss it. Listen. It might be your brain's way of keeping you whole, or it might be something more. Either way, it's real and it's yours. If you're looking at the visual guide, we have some resources for further explanation. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share. We are on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Thank you for listening.